Are you in need of some quick raw feeding life hacks? Look no further. These are things that I wish that I knew years ago when feeding raw and meal prepping. I often look back and cringe thinking about how inefficient I was doing certain things. But it's okay. This is how we learn. So, here are 5 nifty hacks that have made feeding raw a lot easier for me, and will hopefully help you out next time you meal prep. Let's get into it. Number 1, keep a stash of quick parts. We've all done it. It's dinner time for your pets, and when you open the fridge to take out their food, you realize you didn't put a container in there to thaw. No big deal, just go grab a container from the freezer and do a quick thaw in cool water or feed it semi-frozen. But when you check, your freezer is fresh out of prepped meals. This has happened to me a few times, unfortunately, and at times I even had to run to the store to get some pre-made raw just for that evening. But this is where the first hack comes in handy. By keeping small baggies or containers of single parts, this can be your lifesaver on days like this. It also comes in handy when it's prep day, but you just don't have time to do a bulk thaw and prep. Number 2, mix supplements in your veggie puree. Homemade raw diets without whole prey almost always need fresh food additions or supplements added to it for it to be nutritionally balanced. But adding these ground or powdered items individually can get pretty time-consuming. Many pet owners make a veggie blend puree to add to their dog's raw meal as a fiber source. Doing this not only adds to the nutrient profile of your dog's meal, but it also is something that you can use as a base to combine their supplements in. Things like nut and seed mixes, kelp powder, flea and tick powder, and other capsuled supplements are perfectly fine to mix in. Just make sure you're portioning them properly. For instance, if you're doing a week's worth of meals, make a week's worth of veggie mix, then add 7 days worth of each supplement in all of the correct dosages, and mix it all together. After this, you can either add the proper portions to each meal prep container and freeze them, or add each portion at mealtime. I do want to note that any liquid or oil supplements should only be added at mealtime. This is because some can oxidize or degrade when frozen or exposed to oxygen for too long. Number 3, refrigerate your bone broth upside down. If you've ever made bone broth, you know that there's a fat cap that forms at the top of the jar that you have to shimmy out and throw away. This can get annoying, and sometimes it'll even crumble into the broth, which isn't ideal. An easy fix for this is to simply flip the jar upside down while the broth cools and gels. This way, the fat cap will be at the bottom of the jar and you can instantly scoop and serve. I want you to err on the side of caution when you've just poured it into the jar piping hot though. Once you put the lid on, pressure may build up in the jar. I learned the hard way that if you flip it when it's still boiling hot, some might escape and burn you, even if you think you've sealed the lid. Number 4, before prep, weigh out the entire cut instead of one piece at a time. There are a lot of things us raw feeders do during meal prep that makes things take a lot longer than they should. One of them is weighing out each small piece of organ meat to make sure it's the perfect weight before adding it into the container. Let's say you have a large piece of spleen. A better way than cutting off one piece at a time is to weigh the entire cut. Then figure out how many days the cut will provide. If this cut gives me 15 days worth of my second secreting organ portion, I would simply cut the spleen into 15 even pieces and quickly add them to my pet's meal prep containers. Number 5, note the weight of food you have after prep. Once meal prep is finished, you probably have a good amount of items left over. Many times, this is raw meaty bones and organ meats as they take up a smaller portion of the meals. I've always been a little rebellious when it comes to noting down what I have left over, and then when I go to pull out meats to prep, I realize that I'm missing an ingredient that I happened to run out of last prep. It's always good to be organized and aware of what you have in your freezer so you can predict what your next purchases need to be for next prep. So it's always best to jot down what parts you have and its weight. Even today, I'm still learning and improving my pet's diet and meal prep. When I first got into feeding raw, there wasn't much information out there for beginners as there is now. And I have a few other things I know now that I wish I knew back then. Watch this video so you don't make the same mistakes I did.